Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Aurora's edge and watched the massive alien ship grow larger on the main screen. 3 months ago, humanity had received the first message from another intelligent species. Now he was leading the most important meeting in human history. The alien vessel looked like a giant crystal mountain floating in space. It was 10 times bigger than any human ship and seemed to glow with its own inner light. Sharp edges and tall spires covered its surface, making it look both beautiful and dangerous. "They're responding to our communication request," said Amy Chun from her station. She was the best language expert Earth had, and she had been working day and night to learn their language. The aliens called themselves the Veltar, which meant something like those who stand strong in their tongue. "Put them on screen," Jake said. He had been chosen to lead this mission because he was good at talking to people and staying calm under pressure. Right now, he needed both skills more than ever. The screen flickered and showed the inside of the alien ship. Jake tried not to show his surprise at what he saw. The Veltar were tall, much taller than humans, reaching about 7 feet in height. Their skin looked like living crystal, changing colors slightly as they moved. They had 4 arms instead of 2, and their faces were sharp and angular with large, bright eyes. But what struck Jake most was how they carried themselves. Every movement looked controlled and precise, like they were always ready for battle. The one in front wore what looked like armor made of the same crystal material as their skin. "I am War Prime Zethara of the Veltar Empire," the alien said. Her voice was deep and commanding, but Amy's translation device made it sound like perfect English in Jake's earpiece. "I speak for my people in this first meeting between our kinds." Jake stepped forward. "I am Commander Jake Morrison, representing the United Earth Government. We are honored to meet you and your people." Zethara's head tilted slightly, and Jake noticed that her left arm seemed different from the others. It moved more slowly, and the crystal surface looked cracked and scarred. Battle damage, he realized. "We have watched your species for some time," Zethara continued. "You are young, but you fight well. Your recent conflicts show promise. This is why we agreed to this meeting." Behind Zethara stood other Veltar warriors. Jake noticed how they positioned themselves around their leader. One of them, almost as tall as Zethara, but without any visible scars, kept watching her damaged arm with what looked like disapproval. "We hope this meeting can be the start of friendship between our peoples," Jake said carefully. Every word mattered here. "Friendship is earned through strength," said the scarred warrior behind Zethara. "I am Kethmer, second of the War Prime. Your species is small and weak, but you show courage in battle. This counts for something." Jake felt his team tense behind him, but he kept his expression neutral. Dr. Carl Rodriguez, their alien culture expert, had warned him that the Veltar seemed to value only military strength and dominance. "We believe strength comes in many forms," Jake replied. "The strength to explore, to learn, to help others. The strength to choose peace when war would be easier." Several of the Veltar made sounds that Amy later told him meant confusion or disagreement. Zethara raised one of her good arms, and the sound stopped. "You speak of strange concepts," she said, "but you are here, far from your homeworld, facing the unknown. This shows the kind of strength we understand." Jake noticed that as Zethara spoke, she unconsciously moved to hide her damaged arm behind her body. The other Veltar seemed to avoid looking directly at it, as if her injuries were something shameful. "We would like to learn about your culture," Jake said, "and we hope you will want to learn about ours." "Culture is for the weak," Kethmer said, but Zethara silenced him with a sharp look. "We will speak of such things," Zethara said, "but first you must prove you are worthy of our time. We have arranged tests." "Tests?" Jake asked. "Combat trials, your warriors against ours." If you show honor in battle, we will speak of trade and territory. If you fail, you will leave this space and not return. Jake's heart sank. This was exactly what they had hoped to avoid. Earth's leaders had sent him here to make peace, not to start a war. We didn't come here to fight, he said. We came to talk. The Veltar made those confused sounds again, louder this time. Kethmer stepped forward, his crystal skin flashing brighter colors. All meetings between strong peoples begin with tests of combat, he said. How else can we know if you are worthy of respect? Words are wind. Only battle shows truth. Zethara was studying Jake carefully, her large eyes fixed on his face. Your people do not follow this custom? She asked. We have found that talking often works better than fighting, Jake said. Fighting should be the last choice, not the first. Weakness, Kethmer muttered, but Zethara held up her hand again. Interesting, she said slowly. You came here in a small ship with few weapons to face an empire you know nothing about. Either you are very brave or very foolish. Maybe both, Jake admitted, and he thought he saw something that might have been amusement flicker across. Zehara's crystalline features. Very well, Zethara said after a long moment. We will try your way first. If your words prove as strong as your courage in coming here, perhaps we can speak without bloodshed. But know this, human Jake Morrison. In our empire, only the strong survive. The weak are cast out or destroyed. This is the way of the Veltar. This is the way of the universe. As the communication ended and the screen went dark, Jake stood staring at where Zethara had been. Something about the way she had hidden her injured arm and the way the others had looked at her told him there was much more to learn about these crystal warriors. And something told him that their ideas about strength and weakness were going to be the biggest challenge of all. 3 days had passed since the first meeting, and Jake was learning that talking with the Veltar was like walking through a minefield. Every word had to be chosen carefully because their ideas about strength and honor were so different from human ideas. The Veltar had agreed to meet on a neutral space station that floated between their two ships. The station was built quickly, using both human and Veltar technology, and it looked strange with its mix of smooth human curves and sharp crystal angles. Jake sat across from Zethara in the main meeting room. Amy Chun was beside him, working. Hard to translate not just words, but meanings. Dr. Carl Rodriguez took notes on everything he saw, trying to understand how Veltar society worked. We have brought gifts, Zethara said, gesturing to several crystal objects on the table. These are weapons of honor, crafted by our greatest smiths. Among my people, there is no greater gift than a blade that has tasted battle. Jake looked at the crystal swords and spears. They were beautiful in a deadly way, seeming to glow with their own light. They are magnificent, he said honestly, but we brought different kinds of gifts. He nodded to Amy, who brought out a small device. This is a medical scanner, Jake explained. It can look inside a body and find injuries or sickness without cutting the skin. We thought it might help your healers. Kethmer, who stood behind Zethara as always, made a sound of disgust. Machines cannot replace the skill of a warrior healer, he said. Only the weak need such devices. Jake noticed that Zethara's damaged arm twitched slightly when Kethmer said this. She was trying to hide it, but Jake was getting better at reading her movements. We also brought this, Amy said, placing a small crystal on the table. But this wasn't a Veltar crystal. It was from Earth, and it held something special. Music, Jake said, as the crystal began to play soft sounds. We thought you might like to hear how humans express feelings through sound. The Veltar listened. To the gentle melody with expressions Jake couldn't read. Their crystal skin shifted through different colors as the music played. Strange, Zethara said when it ended. Your warriors make these sounds? Not just warriors, Jake said. All kinds of people make music. Children, old people, anyone who wants to. Even the weak ones? Asked another Veltar warrior. Especially them sometimes, Jake replied. We believe that everyone has something valuable to give, even if they can't fight. The room went very quiet. Jake realized he had said something that shocked them. Kethmer was the first to speak. Among the Veltar, those who cannot fight serve. No purpose. The weak are removed from society, so they do not hold back the strong. Removed? Amy asked quietly. Cast out, Zethara said, her voice flat. Sent away from the Empire to live or die on their own. It is the way of survival. The weak must not be allowed to weaken the whole. Jake felt his stomach turn cold. What? About those who are injured in battle? Surely they have earned honor? If they can still fight, they may stay, Kethmer said, and Jake saw him glance meaningfully at Zethara's damaged arm. If they cannot, they have the choice of honorable death or exile. I see, Jake said, beginning to understand the tension he felt in the room. Zethara was walking a dangerous line. Her injuries made her vulnerable to being cast out, and Kethmer seemed to be waiting for his chance to challenge her leadership. Tell us more about these culling protocols, Dr. Rodriguez said, leaning forward with interest that Jake thought was more professional than personal. Every year, we review all those in positions of power, Zethara explained. Those who show signs of weakness or disability are removed. New, stronger leaders take their place. This keeps the Empire strong. And you face such a review? Jake asked gently. Zethara's crystal skin flashed a color that Amy later told him meant anger or embarrassment. All leaders face review, she said stiffly. Kethmer smiled, showing sharp crystal teeth. Some more than others, he said. Recent events have raised questions about certain leaders' fitness to command. Jake understood now. Zethara had been injured in battle, and now her own people saw her as weak. She was fighting not just for her position, but for her right to exist in Veltar society. In human culture, Jake said carefully, we have a saying, the best steel goes through the hottest fire. We believe that those who survive great challenges are often the strongest of all. Pretty words, Kethmer said, but words do not win battles. Whole warriors win battles. Damaged ones lose them. Is that always true? Jake asked. Haven't there been great Veltar warriors who fought on despite injuries? Who turned their scars into wisdom? Several of the Veltar looked uncomfortable. Zethara was staring at Jake with an expression he couldn't read. The old stories speak of such warriors, she said slowly, but that was in the past, when the Empire was young and desperate. Now we can afford to keep only the perfect. Perfect, Jake repeated. And who decides what perfect means? The strong decide, Kethmer said firmly. As it has always been. As it should be? Amy leaned over to whisper in Jake's ear. Their language doesn't have words for compassion or mercy, she said quietly. They have concepts for strength, honor, dominance, but nothing for taking care of the weak. Jake nodded. This was bigger than he had thought. The Veltar weren't just warlike. They had built their entire society around the idea that only the strongest deserve to exist. We have a different view, he said aloud. Humans believe that taking care of those who cannot take care of themselves is a sign of strength, not weakness. Impossible, Kethmer said. Resources spent on the weak are resources taken from the strong. This makes the whole society weaker. Does it? Jake asked. Or does it make the whole society more stable? When people know they will be cared for if they are hurt, they fight harder because they are not afraid of becoming useless. Fear makes warriors strong, another Veltar said. Some kinds of fear, yes, Jake agreed. But the fear of being thrown away by your own people? That might make warriors desperate instead of strong. Desperate people make mistakes. Zathara had been listening to this exchange without speaking, but Jake could see her thoughts moving behind her bright eyes. Her damaged arm was completely hidden now, tucked behind her body where no one could see it. "Your ideas are strange to us," she said finally. "Perhaps too strange. How can a society survive if it does not constantly remove its weakest members?" "By finding ways to make everyone useful," Jake said. "I understanding that strength comes in many forms, and that sometimes the people who look weakest can surprise you with their power." As he spoke, Jake was looking directly at Zathara, and he saw something flicker across her face. Hope, maybe, or just curiosity. But Kethmer saw it too, and his crystal skin darkened with what Jake was learning meant displeasure. The meeting ended soon after, but Jake knew something important had happened. Seeds had been planted, ideas that had never existed in Veltar. Minds before. Whether those seeds would grow or be crushed remained to be seen. The third week of talks had been going badly. What started as careful discussions about trade and territory had turned into something much more dangerous. Kethmer was no longer hiding his challenge to Zethara's leadership, and Jake could see that the other Veltar were starting to choose sides. It happened during the morning session, when they were discussing mining rights in the border systems. Zethara had just finished explaining a proposal that would benefit both species when Kethmer stood up suddenly. "This plan is flawed," he announced to the room. "It gives too much to the humans and asks too little in return. A strong leader would demand more." Zethara's crystal skin flashed warning colors. "The plan ensures long-term stability between our peoples," she said. "Short-term gains are not worth future wars." "Spoken like someone who fears conflict," Kethner replied. And Jake heard several Veltar make sounds of agreement. But perhaps that is understandable. Those who have been broken in battle often lose their taste for strength. The insult hung in the air like poison. Jake saw Zethara's good hands clench into fists, but she kept her voice level. "I have fought in more battles than you have seen," she said. "My record of victory speaks for itself." "Your record, yes," Kethmer said, walking around the table so everyone could see him clearly. "But that was before the war with the Gixtal. Before your injuries changed you." He gestured at her hidden arm. "Now you negotiate like a weakling, giving ground when you should take it. The Empire needs leaders who are whole, not damaged. Remnants of former warriors." Several Veltar nodded, and Jake felt his heart sink. This was exactly what he had been afraid of. The meeting was turning into a challenge to Zethara's authority, and from what he understood of Veltar culture, she was losing. "My injuries do not affect my judgment," Zethara said, but her voice sounded less certain now. "Don't they?" Kethmer pressed. "You flinch when weapons are drawn. You favor your good side in combat drills. You negotiate for peace when honor demands. Strength. These are the actions of someone who has lost the will to fight." "I fight when fighting serves the Empire," Zethara replied, but Jake could see she was struggling. The other Veltar were listening to Kethmer, and their body language showed they were being convinced. "The Empire needs leaders who do not fear." "Battle," Kethmer continued. "Leaders whose minds have not been clouded by pain and weakness. I call for an immediate review of leadership fitness, a formal challenge." Jake didn't need Amy's translation to understand what was happening. If the other Veltar agreed, Zethara would be removed from command and possibly exiled from their society entirely. "The review is not scheduled for another month," Zethara said, but her voice had gone quiet. "Circumstances have changed," Kethmer replied. "Your negotiations with the humans have shown that your judgment is compromised. The Empire cannot wait for scheduled reviews when its leadership is failing." 3 other Veltar stood up, showing their support for Kethmer's challenge. Jake realized that this had been planned. They had been waiting for the right moment to strike, and they had chosen now because it would happen in front of the humans. Zethara's failure would be witnessed by another species, making her shame complete. "I accept the review," Zethara said, because she had no choice. But not here. Such things should be decided among Veltar, not in front of outsiders. "The humans can see what real strength looks like," Kethmer said with a cruel smile. "It will be educational for them." Jake wanted to object, to somehow stop what was happening, but he knew that any interference would only make things worse for Zethara. This was Veltar business, and he was just a witness. The review was brutal. One by one, Kethmer and his supporters listed every decision Zethara had made that they considered weak. Her willingness to negotiate instead of demand. Her reluctance to threaten the humans with force. Her acceptance of concepts like caring for the injured. "She has been infected by human weakness," Kethmer declared. "Their soft ideas about helping the damaged have clouded her mind. She is no longer fit to lead Veltar warriors." Jake watched Zethara through all of this, and his respect for her grew. She stood straight despite the attacks, answering each accusation with dignity. But he could see the pain in her eyes, and not just physical pain. This was the destruction of everything she had worked for, everything she was. The formal vote was close, but Kethmer won. Zethara was relieved of command, pending a full tribunal back on the Veltar homeworld. Jake knew what that meant. She would be examined, found lacking because of her injuries, and cast out of the only society she had ever known. After the meeting ended, the Veltar delegation split into two groups. Most followed Kethmer, their new leader, back to their ship. A few stayed with Zethara, but Jake could see they were uncertain and afraid. That evening, Jake found himself walking through the observation deck of the space station. The stars looked cold and distant through the transparent walls, and he felt like humanity had lost something important today. Not just an ally, but someone who might have been a bridge between their two very different worlds. He wasn't surprised to find Zethara there, standing alone at the large window that looked out toward both ships. Her usual perfect posture was gone, and for the first time since he had met her, she looked tired. "I'm sorry," Jake said as he approached. "What happened today wasn't right." Zethara didn't turn around. "It was inevitable," she said quietly. "I have known since my injury that this day would come. I simply hoped it would be later." "Your injury doesn't make you weak," Jake said. "If anything, it proves how strong you are. You survived something that killed others. You kept fighting when you could have given up." "Pretty words," Zethara said, echoing what Kethmer had said earlier. "But they do not change reality. I am damaged. In Veltar society, the damaged have no place." Jake moved to stand beside her, at the window. Up close, he could see that her damaged arm was worse than he had thought. The crystal surface was cracked and scarred, and it moved stiffly. But it was still functional, still part of her. "In human society," he said, "we have people who have lost arms, legs, even their sight, who still do amazing things. We don't see them as damaged. We see them as survivors, as examples of what the human spirit can overcome." "Your society is different," Zethara said. "We are what we are, but you don't have to be," Jake replied. "Societies can change. People can choose to see things differently." For the first time, Zethara looked at him directly. Her large eyes were bright with unshed tears, and Jake realized that crying was probably another sign of weakness in Veltar culture. "You really believe that?" she asked. "You really think that someone like me could be seen as strong instead of broken?" Jake looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the scars that told stories of battles fought and won, He saw the dignity she maintained even in defeat. He saw the intelligence that had guided her people through complex negotiations. He saw someone who had given everything for her empire and been rejected for her sacrifice. "You know what I see. When I look at you," he said, "I see someone who's brave and beautiful." The words were simple, but they hit Zethara like a physical blow. Her crystal skin went through rapid color changes that Jake had never seen before. Her carefully maintained control shattered completely, and she began to cry openly, her whole body shaking with the force of emotions she had never been allowed to express. Jake realized he had just spoken words that no Veltar had ever heard before, concepts that didn't exist in their language or their culture. And in doing so, he had shown Zethara a mirror that reflected something entirely different from what her own people had taught her to see. Jake had expected many reactions to his words, but not this. Zethara was crying like her heart was breaking, and the sounds she made were unlike anything he had heard from a Veltar before. Her crystal skin was cycling through colors so fast that it looked like a rainbow storm, and her whole body shook with the force of emotions that had been locked away for too long. "I'm sorry," Jake said, reaching out instinctively to comfort her, but stopping himself. He didn't know if touch was welcome in Veltar culture, especially when someone was in such distress. "No," Zethara said through her tears, her voice broken and raw. "You don't understand. No one has ever said such things to me. No one has ever called me beautiful." She turned away from the window, and Jake saw that her tears were leaving crystal traces on her cheeks that glowed softly in the dim light. "In all my life, from the day I was hatched until now, every word spoken about me has been about my strength, or my weakness, my battle skills or my failures, my victories or my defeats, never never about beauty." Jake felt his throat tighten. "Not even when you were young?" "Veltar younglings are evaluated from birth," Zethara said, wiping at her face with her good hand. "The strong are praised and trained. The weak are marked for future removal. There is no room for gentle words or soft concepts." She looked down at her damaged arm, no longer trying to hide it. "When I was injured in the war against the Gixtal, I saved 3 ships full of our people. I held the line while they evacuated. I killed 40 enemy warriors before their weapon brought me down." Her voice was bitter now, and the first thing the healers said when they saw me was that my career was over. The first thing my commander said was that I would probably be retired. Not one person said I was brave. Not one person thanked me for what I had given up. Jake felt anger rising in his chest, but he kept his voice gentle. "Tell me about the war." Zethara was quiet for a long time, staring out at the stars. When she finally spoke, her voice was distant, lost in memory. "The Gixtal came without warning. They were a hive-minded species that saw all other life as obstacles to be removed. They moved through our border systems like a plague, killing everything in their path." She held up her damaged arm, examining the scars that covered it. "I was commanding the defense of Veltara Prime, our most important colony world. 3 million Veltar live there, including many of our greatest minds and our most important breeding centers. The evacuation was going badly. The transport ships were too slow, and the Gixtal were closing in fast. Someone had to hold the orbital defense station while the ships escaped. Someone had to stay behind and buy time with their life." Jake could see where this was going, and his respect for Zethara grew even deeper. "I volunteered," she continued. "My ship was the fastest and best armed. I could do the most damage and last the longest. But when I reached the station, I found 30 other Veltar who had also stayed behind. Young warriors who refused to run while there were still people to save." Her crystal skin darkened with old pain. "We held for 6 hours. 6 hours against endless waves of Gixtal attack ships. One by one, my warriors fell. One by one, their voices went silent on the communication channels. In the end, it was just me and the station's guns against 100 enemy ships. My vessel was crippled, my weapons failing, my life support running out. But the last transport ship was still loading refugees, and they needed 5 more minutes. She touched the worst of her scars, a jagged line that ran from her shoulder to her wrist. A Gix-style boarding ship broke through my shields and latched onto my hull. Their warriors cut through my armor and into my command center. I fought them, hand to hand while keeping one hand on the weapon controls, firing at their ships until the very last second. The refugees escaped, she said simply. All 3 million of them. The transport ships jumped to safety just as the Gix tail overwhelmed the station. I was found 3 days later, barely alive, floating in an escape pod that should not have survived. Jake was quiet for a moment, trying to find words big enough for what he had just heard. You saved 3 million people. I did my duty, Zethara replied. Any Veltar warrior would have done the same. Would they? Jake asked. Did any other commander volunteer to stay behind? Zethara looked uncomfortable. Some argued that we should save the military ships instead of the transports. They said trained warriors were worth more than civilians. But you disagreed. The civilians were what we were fighting for, she said. Protecting them was the whole point of having warriors. Jake stared at her, amazed. And after all that, after saving 3 million lives, your own people called you damaged goods? My arm doesn't work properly, Zethara said. My reflexes are slower on that side. In combat simulations, I score lower than I used to. By Veltar standards, I am objectively diminished. By human standards, Jake said firmly, you are a hero. Sarah's eyes widened. Hero? Someone who risks everything to save others. Someone who puts duty above personal safety. Someone who stands up when everyone else sits down. Jake stepped closer to her. In human culture, we have medals and monuments for people like you. We tell stories about your courage to our children. We consider you the best of what our species can be. Even though I am broken, you're not broken, Jake said. You're wounded. There's a difference. Broken things don't work anymore. You're still here, still fighting, still leading. That's not broken. That's incredible. Zethara was crying again, but these tears seemed different, softer somehow. I don't understand how. Your people think, she said. How can weakness be seen as strength? It's not weakness we admire, Jake explained. It's what you do with the wounds. You could have given up after you were injured. You could have accepted retirement quietly. Instead, you kept serving, kept leading, kept fighting for your people, even when they turned their backs on you. He gestured to her scars. These marks don't show weakness. They show that you were willing to pay any price to protect others. In human eyes, that makes you beautiful, not damaged. Beautiful, Zethara repeated the word like she was tasting something new. I have never thought of myself that way. Maybe? It's time you started, Jake said gently. They stood together in the observation lounge, human and alien, looking out at the vast emptiness between stars. Jake realized that something fundamental had changed in this moment, not just for Zethara, but for the future of both their species. What happens now? Zethara asked. When I return to the Empire, I will face the tribunal. They will examine me, find me wanting, and cast me out. That is the way of things. What if it didn't have to be? Jake asked. What if there was another way? Zethara looked at him with something that might have been hope. What do you mean? Jake smiled. I mean that sometimes the best way to change a culture is to show them a different mirror, to let them see themselves through new eyes. And in that moment, looking at this wounded warrior who had given everything for her people, only to be rejected by them, Jake began to form a plan that would either save Zethara or destroy any chance of peace between their species. The next morning, Jake called for an emergency joint session of both delegations. Amy Chun looked worried as she checked her translation equipment, and Dr. Carl Rodriguez kept asking Jake if he was sure about what he was planning to do. Jake wasn't sure at all, but he knew that if he didn't act now, they would lose Zethara forever. Kethmer entered the meeting room with the confidence of someone who had already won. Behind him came the other Veltar, most of whom now looked to him as their leader. Zethara came in last, her posture formal and controlled again, but Jake could see the difference in her eyes. Something had changed during their conversation. The night before, "I have called this meeting," Jake began, "because I believe there has been a fundamental misunderstanding about strength and leadership." "The humans wish to lecture us on our own culture?" Kethmer asked with amusement. "How predictable." "Not lecture," Jake replied. "Share perspective. Yesterday, you removed Zethara from command because you considered her damaged and weak. I want to tell you what humans see when we look at her." Several Veltar made dismissive sounds, but Jake pressed on. "We see someone who saved 3 million lives at the cost of her own body. We see someone who held a defensive position against impossible odds so that others could escape. We see someone who fought hand-to-hand against alien borders while still operating weapons to protect fleeing refugees." Kethmer's crystal skin darkened. Ancient history. "What matters is her current capacity, not past glories." "Is it?" Jake asked. He gestured to Amy, who activated a holographic display. "Dr. Rodriguez has been analyzing Veltar combat records. Please show them what you found, Doctor." Rodriguez stood up nervously. "In the past year, under Zethara's command, Veltar forces have won 87% of their engagements. The average for other commanders in your fleet is 62%. The room went quiet. Kethmer's expression showed disbelief. "Furthermore," Rodriguez continued, "casualties under her command are 40% lower than the fleet average, while mission success rates are 23% higher." "Impossible," Kethmer said. "She is damaged. Her reflexes are impaired." "Her reflexes might be slower," Jake agreed, "but her mind is sharper. She thinks differently now. She considers consequences that other commanders miss. She values the lives of her warriors in ways that make them fight harder for her."